And now, live from San Francisco, it's Barbara Simpson on Hot Talk 560, KSFO.
Hour number 2, right here on Hot Talk 560 KSFO. I'm Barbara Simpson, Babe in the Bunker, with you, as I tell you, Saturdays and Sundays from, let's see, Saturdays it's 4 until 7, no, 5 until 7, and Sundays it's 4. Is it got it right? No, Sundays it's, where am I? What's my name again? Saturdays at 5, Sundays at 4. Is that right? Where we got it. I'll get it straight yet. Probably about another 12 years I'll remember. You know, when you've been doing it for 17 years and all of a sudden they change it on you, it takes a little while to get used to it. In any event, this hour, is my microphone working? I sound funny to me. You're not laughing. I guess I don't sound funny to you. No. Okay. Barbara Simpson right here. We're going to be talking about, what's happening in your town and my town, every single town in the state of California, actually in the country, having to do with Agenda 21. Now, it's not conspiracy. This is really happening now. There's a huge flap going on in Danville, huge flap going on in Lafayette, just for our own immediate area in Alameda and Contra Costa County. I told you that I'm interested in, actually this came about as a couple of articles I saw. See, I read the newspapers. I do like the newspapers. I like the Contra Costa Times. I like to know what's going on in that area because I live in Contra Costa County. I want to find out what's happening. And in fact, there were 2 articles this week that caught my eye, and I thought, well, first of all, I want to talk about them, and second of all, I want to invite Mimi Steele with us because Mimi is very up on these kinds of things, not necessarily that particular issue that's going on in Lafayette or in Danville, but the whole idea of how communities are being forced to come up with housing, low-income housing, they call it infill housing, to build up the center of your town so that there you can have apartments and homes over stores right near the BART station or other transportation, bus stops, that type of thing. And the similar kind of thing is going on in El Sobrante. They're having zoning for housing there. And I mentioned the situation in Danville. There's a huge flap. They had meetings there. There is a push for these low-income projects. People are saying that it will spoil the town. They had so many speakers at the Planning Commission that they had to spread out the time. They want to make room for low-income housing and more high-density development. One gentleman said that he lived in Fremont before, then he moved to Danville. And he saw Fremont transform from a rural community to a festering cluster of humanity, as he described it. He said he left that to come to Danville, and he said, you're starting the same thing there. And this is the updated general plan for Danville, the 2030 plan. They're going to be having a series of meetings starting on December 11th. They wanted to get some feedback from people. And the article goes on, and this is in the Contra Costa Times, that to meet state housing requirements, so mind now, you have the state requiring every community to provide certain number of low-income housing. And they had to change their general plan, designating almost 10 acres around the town for high-density, low-income housing. And so there was a lot of opposition to it, but ABAG, some of the crowd's discontent was aimed at ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments. You need to know what that is because they are the ones who come up with the proposed housing needs for 101. That's a lot of jurisdictions. That means towns and cities just in the Bay Area. You're talking about the Bay Area. We're not talking about the state. It's going on all over the state, by the way. It's going on all over the country. But ABAG is an unelected body. They're creating a 9-county general plan that creates high-density, low-income housing in all 9 Bay Area counties. They say it's for the environment, but they say that we have to get rid of our single-family residential homes, get out of our cars, have high-density, what they call stack-and-pack housing. And ABAG is telling you that if you want your transportation money, you better do it, which is why Your town is doing it, which is why my town is doing it. And big flap in Lafayette. Same page, same newspaper. Big changes for Lafayette. And they had a city council meeting. There is a proposed 72-unit town center condominium right next to the BART station. Isn't that nice? People were furious. They don't want it. They want the semi-rural. But they're talking about 3 and 4 and 5-story buildings. Who's going to live there? Well, I don't know. Maybe they'll move some people out of Oakland. Who's going to move there? Why are they going to move there? They don't want you to have cars. This is what's going on, and it's really quite shocking. I was looking at another one here. I mentioned the Lafayette. The town center projects are proceeding. I know this is going on. I mentioned Rinda and Moraga, and all of the other towns everywhere. I invited Mimi Steele to be with us because this is a lady who knows of what she speaks when we're talking about issues like this. The general idea of what is happening to our towns, Mimi. First of all, welcome to the program. You're president of San Francisco Bay California Property Rights Organization. I'll give you some more websites later. But this, what I'm talking about, is no surprise to you, is it, Mimi?
Barbara, you had a great introduction. It's no surprise. And I have to tell you, I can't believe this is happening in the United States of America. This is some truly astounding stuff. And when people understand the implications of what is being proposed, they get really, really upset. And so I think the key to this initially is to get as many people informed on this subject as possible. And I appreciate the fact that you're given time on the radio to address this issue because we reach a lot more people than we can in individual meetings.
Well, the thing that I've found, Mimi, in doing this is I've talked around about it before. I've spoken with you about different aspects of all of this because there's a lot to it. It's not just the housing aspect. But, I've seen it happening, and the response of the local elected officials, quite frankly, is we have to do it because the state tells us we have to do it. And quite frankly, if we don't do it, they won't give us our transportation money. And that's the threat that the state has over the towns. And the towns, everybody's strapped for money. They don't have enough money. And so, therefore, they have to give in, and that's the tactic that's used. Now, am I being too dramatic when I say that?
No, you're not being too dramatic when you say that. And but the other component of that is that nobody's giving any money for the additional effects that this kind of housing is going to impose on the community. So while they're withholding or giving transportation funds for complying or not complying, they're not going to do anything about what's going to happen with the schools, what's going to happen with fire, what's going to happen with the infrastructure. So I use this analogy. If you were a business person and somebody came to you and said, I'll give you $5 to do this, mm-hmm. and you looked at it as a business person and you said, but wait a minute, it's going to cost me $12. By the time I do everything else that's required to make this all work, it's going to cost $12. As a business person, you would never take that deal. Mm-hmm. But what happens in these environments is I think a lot of elected officials don't really understand the implications. They rely on their city staff. These people are...
And consultants.
Yeah. They're bureaucrats. They're not business people. They've been trained by an organization called the American Planning Association. That organization is deeply embedded in the concept of this smart growth and sustainable development. That's the terms that they use to talk about the high-density housing near mass transit. Mm-hmm. And so you have elected officials that are kind of looking at their city planners, and the guys are saying, hey, yeah, you got to do it. Let's do it. This is the right thing to do. And that's really where the problem is. And I think the only way, you're right, this is coming down from the state. It's top-down, central planning, something that the Soviets would have been very proud of in their day.
Yeah.
And it's just nuts. And so like I said, it's coming from the state level. It is the law. and I think your elected officials, your state assembly and your state senate people have voted for all of this stuff. They've imposed these laws. They haven't put them to the vote of the people. And I think the initial phase of this has to be to wake as many people up and create as much outrage as possible. And I'm glad that Danville and Lafayette are doing it, and there have been groups over in the peninsula, Mountain View, Sunnyvale. People are starting to come out to these meetings and protest.
When they protest, what can you do? I mean, what recourse do you have when you have people in government saying that, was it AB 32? It's a result of that, and the state says you have to do it, and if you don't do it, you're going to be harmed. Do they have any recourse by saying, hell no, we're not going to do it? What happens if they do that?
Yeah, well, there's two laws. There's AB 32, which is the cap and trade law, basically, and then there's SB 375. SB 375 is really the controlling law for greenhouse gases and what's promoting all of the sustainable community strategies.
Yeah.
And we're still going through the process of figuring out how to challenge this. It is embedded in the law. I think that the initial hope is that enough people get upset about it that they'll at least talk to your local city council. Go to individuals and let them understand what's going on. And if a community has to say we don't want the grant money, we're not going to have to. We're going to deal with the roads the way they are. That might be the price you have to pay to not have to get sucked into this whole situation.
When you say get sucked into the whole situation, let's say a community decides to get sucked into the situation. What does that mean for the community? What's going to happen to that town?
Well, they're going to have to comply with it's called the housing element. So if I could kind of give you an overview,
sure.
The state has something called the Regional Housing Needs Analysis. It's nicknamed RHNA.
Mm-hmm.
And what that is a number that comes from the state community development organization. That's a bunch of bureaucrats, and they look at projections of population. And by the way, most of their projections are inaccurate because they're projecting growth in California, and the opposite is happening. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say that yes, they've given the number. They give the number to ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments. There are actually 17 of these regional planning organizations around the state in all of the major metropolitan areas. So our area is controlled by ABAG. ABAG takes these numbers, and they have a computer model, Barbara, and the computer model is called the Quality of Life Factors Comparison.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. What is that?
Isn't that lovely? Well, it's a model that puts in 3 factors in every community that they're responsible for. They take the jurisdiction's housing affordability,
mm-hmm.
The average income of the people in that community, and the average school scores. And they come up with what they call a quality of life indicator.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if your town has a high quality of life indicator, once it's crunched through this computer model, then you don't have your fair share of a diverse population.
Oh, so in other words, we're doing too well, is what you're saying.
Doing too
we're
well.
Too smart, we're too well, we're too accomplished, and therefore they're going to punish us by forcing people who aren't doing so well to come and live with us?
Exactly. They want to level the playing field.
Ah.
And this is in the I have a copy of the several pages of the code for the California Government Code, and I don't want to bore everybody with this long document, but they say their regional housing needs allocation shall be consistent with the following objectives, and one of the objectives is promoting infill development and socioeconomic equity.
What does that mean?
That means what we just said earlier, leveling the playing field, so that once all of these communities have a mix of a population that's about even, then what's going to happen is the median incomes are going to be lower, the house prices are going to be lower, the school scores are going to be lower, and you're going to end up with more equity among all of the towns.
It sounds like something right out of the Soviet Union to me.
Absolutely. You know, if people, I do have a website, Bay Area Liberty, and there's a tab that says the Regional Housing Needs Number, and if people go there and click on that, it explains what that housing allocation is that I just explained. And in MTC's documentation, they say the purpose of the RHNA is the 175 income redistribution.
What does that mean? What's the 175? What's the number?
That means that they have to bring in more lower-income people into higher-earning areas.
How do you do that? I mean, if they tomorrow in Danville built all of this housing for so-called low-cost housing, then how do you get people from, I don't know, Oakland, Richmond, whatever areas are considered lower socioeconomically? How do you get the people to move?
I would imagine they'd want to move because they would see these areas as desirable to live in. The other component of this that's part of the One Bay Area plan is what they call a jobs housing connection, and they make the assumption that if you have housing near jobs, then the people who live in the housing are going to go to the jobs that are nearby.
Well, there is some logic to that, but the fact remains is if you move a population out of a very poor area into a more upscale area, the kinds of jobs that they might be qualified for are not even going to be there.
That's correct. And it sort of assumes that people are interchangeable. And so if I have a job here and if I have somebody living in a house here, there'll be a match. Mm-hmm. You know, the other implication of that is you have people coming into these housing units that are not chosen by the employers. So what is that going to mean to you ultimately? That could mean that at some point they're going to incentivize employers to hire people that live in the neighborhood.
I don't know, but these days anything's possible.
That could be the logical extension of it. Now, I live in the East Bay and I work over in Mountain View. If I were competing for that job, they might say, "Well, give it to somebody else who lives in Sunnyvale because they're closer."
So you would be discriminated against because you live too far away.
That is, when you carry this stuff out to its logical conclusion, that's the kind of thing that could happen because this is all about control. This is all about social engineering, and it's really pretty disturbing when you look at what's actually happening and what they're actually trying to do with this. When people really understand the implications of this, they don't want it. And it came to me a couple months ago when I was thinking about all of this stuff. The people who are doing this are counting on three things. They're counting on your ignorance, your apathy, and your isolation. Mm-hmm. And if we can get people together and start educating them and getting them out in the community, talking to people, that is a really critical piece of all of this.
Let me ask you a question. I used the word conspiracy before, and I know that a lot of people, when they hear Agenda 21, United Nations, it's all conspiracy kind of thing. When somebody says to you, "You're just a conspiracy monger, this is not really what's happening," how do you answer them in a way that you can try to get the point over to their thick head?
So, there are different schools of thought on how to address that issue. I'll give you my opinion.
Okay.
And there will be other people with different opinions, obviously. But for me, in the Bay Area, I think it's really important to look at what the documents are saying of the people who are trying to implement this on us. And what those documents talk about is something called the Sustainable Community Strategy. Mm-hmm. They talk about livable communities, walkable communities. Those kinds of terms are the terms of art that are used to describe Agenda 21, if you will. So, mm-hmm. So to me, rather than getting into a discussion of whether or not it's Agenda 21, I try to focus on what people will hear when they go to their city council. I was 2 weeks ago, I was on Glenn Beck's show when he introduced his new book, Agenda 21.
I've heard about that, yeah.
It's a great book, and one of the comments he made is that, number one, you have to go local, and number two, he asked Rosa Corey, who's also been on your show. She's with Democrats against UN Agenda 21. He said to her, why do people call this a conspiracy theory? And she said, well, because when you go into your local community, you won't see the term Agenda 21. Mm-hmm. So they've been very crafty. The people that have been pushing this have been very crafty in terms of how they've set it up. And so I just like to go right to the argument of, look, this is smart growth, this is sustainable development. Even if it came from the tooth fairy, you wouldn't want it.
Okay, hold your thought right there. We're going to take a quick break, get a little business in here on KSFO, and we will continue. If you want to get in on this conversation, particularly if you have any questions about your own local area, I urge you to call now. Mimi will be with us for the full hour. My name is Barbara Simpson. Her name is Mimi Steele. This is 808-5600 on KSFO.
You're listening to Barbara Simpson on Hot Talk 560 KSFO.
Barbara Simpson here on Hot Talk 560 KSFO. We're talking about the planning that is going on, and we're talking about, our region in the 9-county Bay Area. But this is going on statewide, and it's going on actually across the country. And if you want to know the truth, it's going on around the world. It's not unique to this country. I'm Barbara Simpson. This is KSFO. My guest to talk about this in a whole variety of ways and how it affects us is Mimi Steele, who is president of San Francisco CAPR. That is the, property rights organization. Her website, bayarealiberty.org and proprights.org. And her Twitter is at 912CalGal. Very simple. Thank you, baby. I appreciate it. So tell me, what kind of reaction do you get when you go to meetings and talk to people and give presentations?
I get shock. People, and the other thing too is we try to network with a lot of people, and we've had calls from some of the wealthier communities in the area, and we explain to them what's going on, and they say, no, that can't be happening.
Exactly.
There's a lot of denial out there. Mm-hmm. And I think the more that we can show people the documents and have them understand what's going on, the better off we're going to be. You mentioned that this is going on around the country because of the 912 organization. I'm connected with a lot of groups that are fighting this around the country.
Sure.
And I got connected with a gentleman in New Hampshire, and they have a plan there called the Granite State Future. And it's for the whole state, but it's just like the One Bay Area plan. Just take our name out and put their name in. It's exactly the same thing. And when he was going through the documentation about how they were going to implement this plan, the planners were talking about the obstacles to having this plan be successful. And one of the obstacles they specifically said they had to overcome was New Hampshire's strong individual rights and property rights perspective. Mm-hmm. So they're very blatant. If you really scratch below the surface, they try to paint this lovely utopian view of what life is going to be like, and it's going to be great, and everybody's going to be happy. If we would only do these things, if we would only give up our liberty or give up our private property rights, then it would be perfect. They don't want you to scratch the surface, and that's really what we're about, is educating people to scratch the surface and understand what's really going on and then start talking.
Yeah, I think probably the most difficult part is that most people, I think, don't really, at least up to fairly recently, think about property rights. Johnny graduates from college, he gets married, he and Susie go out and buy a house, and they don't think about anybody having influence on what kind of house they buy or where they buy or whatever, other than the bank controlling how much they can spend, But aside from that, it's their property. They can pretty much do what they want with it. And little by little, the various zoning laws and the various tentacles of local government, county government, state government are encroaching into all of this, where you can't have this on your roof, or you can't have this kind of driveway, or you can't have this kind of garbage collection. Now you can't have this kind of light bulb, and you can't have this kind of washer and dryer. And all of these kinds of things have been sort of happening in almost an avalanche over the last few years. But still people are, they don't want to see it. I think they're afraid to see what's around them.
Well, and some of it, too, is I think a lot of our educational system has been oriented against property rights. There's a lot of push in the schools about, sharing, and they make the young kids feel guilty about wanting to have an American lifestyle. So this kind of thing sort of is percolating through the school system. And if you listen to the planners talk, what they're telling us is, well, we've done surveys, and all of these young people, they really want to live in apartments next to mass transit. Well, that might be fine when you're right out of college, but not when you have kids and you're planning your life.
No, and I think, but brainwashing them into even believing that is just really not part of what the school system should be. There's no question about it. Yesterday we talked about the oyster farm at Drake's Bay, which is a situation where, in essence, the feds are coming in and telling this man that you can't have your business, even though it's been in that location for over 100 years, even though the documentation is patently false. But he's got 90 days. Now, I don't know, I'm hoping he fights it. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what kind of leg he'd have to stand on legally. But this is absolutely outrageous. But that's just one example. There are ranchers and farmers across the country who have been put out of business for a whole variety of reasons, usually environmental reasons. And it's part of the same cabal, isn't it?
It is, and you had a great guest on a couple weeks ago, Elizabeth Nixon, with her book Eco-Fascism.
Oh, yes, she was wonderful.
That was fantastic, and Drake's Bay is just one small example, unfortunately, of what's happening. We had some alerts a couple months ago about Golden Gate Recreation Area, where once it became a national park, they started banning dogs. They used to have, open leash areas, and they started banning dogs. And then some guy was out there with his dog off leash, and a woman tased him. So all of this is happening all around the country. It's really very distressing. There's another thing that's going on in California, and it's called ballot box planning.
What's that? That's new to me.
It's pretty disturbing. And I had a supervisor in Alameda County defend it. If there's some property, and this happened in Alameda County north of 580, if there's some property that the environmentalists or the city or the county thinks should be preserved, quote unquote, they can put that on the ballot. And they put it on the ballot, and they have everybody in the county vote on it. So, talk about private property and the use of your private property.
Wait. Now, you're talking about land that's, let's say I own 10 acres of land.
Yep.
And they think that should be green space, open space.
Yep.
They can put it on the ballot that people can vote whether or not it can be open space, or I can own it and do what I want with it, and I don't have anything to say about it?
That's right. They vote. They vote majority rule. This is two wolves and a sheep looking for what's for dinner. They vote majority rule on the usage of that property. So these ranchers now have severe restrictions on their property in that area.
Where did this come from?
I found it because I was listening to a conversation with the Alameda County supervisor, and he just threw out this concept of ballot box planning, and I looked it up, and it is, in fact, in the documentation. You can find it.
When you say documentation, how is it even legal?
That's my question. There are, and again, Barbara, I'm not an attorney. If there's any attorneys out there that could help us, please, go to my website and let me know who you are. We could really use some help. But a bunch of cities got together and they wrote a document called ballot box planning, And it explains, and the interesting thing in this case in Alameda County was what had happened was the Sierra Club wanted to preserve that property.
Yeah.
And so they went to apparently Jerry Brown, and when he was mayor of Oakland, and he put it up to Alameda County for a vote. So anybody within the sound of my voice who lives in the Bay Area and who owns what would traditionally have been considered rural property, you need to be very careful, because there are a lot of people, stakeholders they call them, that are looking at preserving, quote unquote, your property. And the reason I brought that up is this gets back to the Drakes Bay and the Golden Gate Park. A lot of people get sucked into agreements with the federal or state government to preserve their property, conservation easements. There's all kinds of Williamson Act, all kinds of things like that. That is making a deal with the devil, because they will break their agreement with you, and that's basically what happened with Drakes Bay. They just didn't renew the lease. Yeah,
and they were supposed to, the agreement signed was that it was supposed to be in perpetuity, and it wasn't at all.
Exactly.
Whoa, boy, oh boy. Listen, I got a whole board full of calls here with people who want to talk to you, so hang on, Mimi. We'll be right back after this quick break, and we'll get to your calls. Everybody on the line, stay there. Promise I'll get to you right here on KSFO.
You're listening to Barbara Simpson on Hot Talk 560 KSFO.
Barbara Simpson here at Hot Talk 560 KSFO. My guest is Mimi Steele. Let's get to the phones because so many people want to talk to her. It's a very important subject. I'm glad you guys are interested in it. Herb is calling us from Orinda. Hello, Herb. You're on the air with Barbara and Mimi Steele.
Thank you very much. Mimi, I had the pleasure of meeting you at an ABAG MTC meeting, and I thought you were just dynamite in the presentation you made. And I'm going to be very quick because I know you got a lot of people on the line.
Yes.
What are you or is anybody else trying to coordinate the activities between the different cities? For instance, I went down to the Danville meeting. I live in Orinda. Okay. And I went down to the Danville meeting, and those people were really outraged. And there seems to be a lot of outrage potentially in separated communities, and I think the outrage would be better directed if it was somehow coordinated. And I'm not necessarily saying that that's your job to do. I'm just wondering if anybody's trying to do it.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because what's the old line? In unity there is strength. One little town screaming is not going to make much difference, but if you have 20 towns screaming, they might pay attention.
Yeah.
Okay.
And perhaps I'm wondering, have you done anything in trying to get the Pacific Legal Foundation interested in taking up this cause? Because that might be a reasonable clearinghouse for a lot of these places to go. I've gone to Orinda meetings. I have tried to get them to talk to other cities. They're concerned. You were talking about the money side of it. I think they're concerned about two things. Number one is the loss of highway funds, and number two is the litigation problem and the cost associated with litigation, and the fact that Pleasanton, although I'm not familiar with the case, but Pleasanton got sued by some do-gooder group by trying to block this stuff. And I think part of their concern is not just the loss of funds on highway money, which is not all that much, but the cost of the litigation.
There's no question. Let's have her respond. Thank you very much, Herbie. Bringing some really good points. Is there any way to get these various towns together, or people who are upset, to have more strength in their objections?
Barbara, we've been struggling with that. It's kind of like herding cats.
Yeah.
There are a lot of different groups out there that have different mailing lists. Right now, what we're trying to do is get people, the individual groups are trying to get people to sign up on their mailing list. I have a calendar on my website where I try, if somebody wants to, I call them a property rights watchdog. All you have to do if you find out about a meeting is send it to me, sfinfo@proprights.org. I put it on the calendar, then I blast it out to my email list. Right now there is no one person organizing anything, not that somebody wouldn't want to, but it's just kind of, we're all grassroots people. Most of us are doing this because we believe in the cause, not because we have not because we're getting paid for it.
Right. This is not a job. You're not working for some outfit or anything.
Right. Well, I have a full-time
No, I mean, but your work on this aspect of it, though, is not done as a job.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He brought up a couple of really good points, too. We have talked to Pacific Legal. The problem is the law, from what we can tell at this point, is reactive rather than proactive. So they're looking for the harm to have occurred, and by that time it's too late. So, again, if there's any attorneys out there that can help us, we would love to have your help. He talked about litigation. That is a definite concern. The organization that sued Pleasanton is an organization called Urban Habitat. They actually have connections to Van Jones. If people are not familiar with him, he was Obama's Green Job Czar. And he's from the Oakland area, and he's really into social equity, social justice. That's his thing. And because of what happened in Pleasanton, now Urban Habitat is going around to other communities, and they're threatening them. They're telling them, we're gonna do to you what we did to Pleasanton if you don't comply. So this is extortion at the highest level. And again, it would be great if there was something that we could do legally. We're just kind of trying to feel our way through this. I'm not an attorney. I don't claim to be one, but we sure could use some help.
Sounds like community organizers are using the tactics of threatening. It's sort of like what Jesse Jackson does when he wants to get a company to do what he wants. He goes in and threatens them, and so he gets money from them.
Yes.
So that he doesn't do anything to them.
Exactly. And, it's funny because when I give my presentations, I always end up towards the end by saying that I'm community organizing for the Constitution. Mm-hmm. Nobody's out there doing that. I mean, in the official NGO groups, they're not out there doing that. And we actually, one of the things we did was we went to John Capal and asked Howard Jarvis if they would send a letter to the Metropolitan Transportation Commission about their Policy Advisory Committee. Now, this is an organization that is actually dictating a lot of the policies down to the cities, and they have a Policy Advisory Committee that's made up of all of these social equity groups.
Oh boy!
And Capal wrote a letter, and he said, we really think you should have some average citizen taxpayers on your board. And the response we got from MTC was, hey, we have no plans to change this. We're fine the way we are. Existing categories will handle taxpayer interests. So they have no they have no interest in hearing from us, which is all the more reason why we need to be vocal and have them here. Now, the gentleman was also talking about the ABAG meetings. There has been so much upset over those meetings that we actually have video. I've got 2 videos on my YouTube website where in July the woman from, I think she's from Novato, she at the board meeting said, you know what, those visioning sessions were not very effective. We need to do something different about them. And then about 2 weeks ago in the MTC meeting, they actually said that those visioning sessions were painful. Mm-hmm. So the word's getting out on some level.
And you've got to keep it coming out. Let's get another call in. Dee in Tri-Valley is giving us a call. Hi, Dee. You're on the air with my guest, Mimi Steele, and Barbara Simpson on KSFO.
Hi, Barbara. First of all, I'd just really like to thank Mimi for shedding light on all of this, and especially for shedding light on Drake's Bay Oyster Company, because we all know what's happening there is a travesty.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to ask her, I've been to a lot of these meetings, and the politicians have scorn for us, and they ridicule us, and their staff does too. How do we fight these people? Because we're not going to win in the ballot box in California. That.
Well, it's tough, that's for sure, and it's getting tougher.
Yeah, I think that the way we do this is, and I think Glenn Beck had the key when he had the special 2 weeks ago. You really need to sit down one-on-one with your various city council members and mayors. You need to be talking to these people. I've got some documentation that's going to be coming out hopefully in January on how to talk to local officials.
Okay.
It'll be a handbook, and the more we can get people trained to do that. One of the things that Glenn made really clear in his comments was that you don't want to go about this by screaming at people, and so you have to really get in and understand where they're coming from. And some people will see the light because they honestly don't understand what's going on. And if we can educate them, that's really great. Some of them are just going to be, I don't care, this is the way it should be, we want to social engineer California.
Well, they won't say it that way. It's that we're trying to save the earth, we're trying to do this, all climate change and earth warming and all of that all put together is no question. Thank you, Dee. I would suggest that you go to Mimi's website and check it out, bayarealiberty.org and proprights.org/SFBay. And let's see if we can get another call in here. And those of you on the line, Mimi said she can stay a little bit over the top of the hour. So for the rest of you, Bill and Ken and Lisa and Sonny and Ralph, stay there. Promise I'll get to you after the news. But let's go to Tim in Marin County right now.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I appreciate what you're talking about.
Okay.
I have a question to you about the sort of specifics of the downsides of all this that you're talking about. I live in Marin County. I was in San Francisco for 18 years. I lived amongst very, relatively unsavory people for years and years and coexisted quite nicely. But what I don't understand is why some people, like your guest, have such a huge problem with the urban, more rural communities that have more money, lifting up some of the people in these cities that bear the brunt of the disenfranchised for so long. Why would you not make use of our mass transit and our open areas that are basically...
What it really comes down... Tim, I'm really sorry. We've got a terrible phone connection, so I had to let him go. But essentially he's saying, gosh, if you have the really nice communities and they have all the amenities and stuff, why would you not want them to share it with people who don't? That's essentially what he's saying. Kind of sounds like coming out of Washington, but how would you answer that, Mimi Steele?
I would answer that by saying that any community that has tried smart growth, which is part of this process of bringing these other people in, has not had a very good experience with it. And rather than lifting these people up, what tends to be, and again, I'm sure there are exceptions, but what tends to happen if you look at the statistics is everything goes down. Mm-hmm. So you're not helping these people. The other thing about this is this really locks people into poverty. Instead of giving them the incentives to earn and strive and move to a better area, you're automatically putting them into another area. They can't afford a home there. They're never going to build any equity, and they're going to be permanently almost some kind of a, I hate to say it like second-class citizen, but they're not going to be able to climb the ladder by going through the effort of getting property and moving themselves up.
It's reflective of the whole attitude behind affirmative action in schools. We don't have enough Hispanic students, we don't have enough black students, so we'll lower the standards, we'll let them in. But then they can't keep up. It's like the football players who never get graded, who get passed on, and they graduate. And some of them are illiterate. Some of them have no training at all. They can't do anything. But by God, they made money for the school because they played on the team. It's the same thing with the students. You're doing a disservice to the students. But if you move it, I lived through the busing experiment down in Los Angeles, or at least the beginning of it. And then we moved. But I wasn't going to allow my children to be part of that. And I had friends who did allow their children to be part of it, and their children's grades suffered, and they got out as soon as they could. It doesn't work.
You're absolutely right. And I think the thing that's sad about this is people get sucked in, again, to this utopian vision that if we only did this, this, and this, the world would be a better place. But that's not reality. And I think part of what we have to do is we have to get reasonable business people involved in the process. Because right now, when you go to these hearings, except for a few exceptions of some private citizens going, these people are in an echo chamber. You hear the politicians, you hear the bureaucrats, you hear the advocacy and stakeholder groups, and they're all singing "Kumbaya." If we only do this, the world would be better.
But you know what strikes me, and I was thinking back to the last caller of what his goal was sort of, as you said, leveling the playing field. Everybody is out there with a different goal. What are they really trying to do? The truth is, if the economy were better, if the schools were better, then there would be opportunities for kids in the poorer neighborhoods to get out, to get a job and to move up, which was what people have done for years and years. But we're moving out of that into the realm of where you have to give people things. Mimi, you said you can stay a little bit over the top of the hour.
And now, live from San Francisco, it's Barbara Simpson on Hot Talk 560 KSFO.
Hour number 3, right here on Hot Talk 560 KSFO. I'm Barbara Simpson, the babe in the bunker. The phone number is 808-5600. I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight, Sundays 4 to 7, Saturdays 5 to 7. We're continuing our discussion. Actually, yesterday we did the story of what happened with the Drake's Bay Oyster Company, and I was pleased that there was such excellent reaction to it, that so many of you were interested in what was happening to them, supporting them, and furious over the feds taking away their business, which is essentially what it does. Ken Salazar, Secretary of the Interior, decided that this company has to close. They have 90 days to get rid of everything, and they want to turn the land over to nature so that Mother Nature can have it, and it will be a blessing for future generations, which, of course, is what they want to do on as much land as they can. And so there has been a gradual turning over of land into national parks, and then when it's a national park, then you can't do anything. And by the way, and this has nothing to do with what we're talking about now, but in a way it does. We talk about all the border problems particularly in Arizona. Most of the border in Arizona is a border along national park land, which means that the Border Patrol is not allowed to patrol on national park land. So when they talk about closing the border, you have this huge section of border that's wide open. Anybody can go across because the Border Patrol is not allowed to be there. Now, you're government at work. But let's get back to what we're talking about here in the Bay Area. Mimi Steele is with us. She's with BayAreaLiberty.org, and I urge you to take a look at it. We have a lot of people on the line with questions about what she and I have been talking about. And I've got a list here, by the way, of the draft from the ABAG board from this summer of the Regional Housing Need Allocation from the year 2014 to 2022. And it has every region, all the counties, all the communities in the counties, and the unincorporated areas as well, and the total number of housing units that have to be provided. Very low, low, moderate, and above moderate. And we will discuss that a little bit, too. I'm not going to read you all the numbers. It'll drive you crazy. But let's go. Mimi, you there?
I'm there.
All right. Let's get on the phones again. Bill in the East Bay, you are on the line with Mimi and Barbara on KSFO.
Barbara.
Yes.
And Mimi.
Yes.
Under the guise of environmentalism, we have established a class warfare that is both communist and socialist in theory. We talk about economic equity, words that you've used, economic diversity, and all these things are have been promoted under the guise of environmentalism.
Mm-hmm. And
where do we go? I flew in the military, and there was a point in which we were flying. There was a point of no return.
They made a movie by that, I recollect, years ago.
And if you keep going, you hope you can reach your destination because you can't get back.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid we're at the crossroads.
I think you're absolutely right. Thank you, Bill, for bringing that up. Mimi, we're facing that not only on issues like this, but we're facing that on what's going on in Washington now with the budget. This fiscal cliff they keep talking about is that kind of point of no return that Bill was just talking about.
Yeah, Barbara, we're getting it from all sides, and as I started off, I don't recognize my country in a lot of areas. I can't believe this is the United States. The only thing I can tell people, from my perspective, is I want to focus on something that I can have an impact on. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's the local communities, because when you think about the way our government was founded and what its purpose was, the most power was supposed to be at the individual, and then the next level of power was supposed to be in the local communities, mm-hmm. with the least amount of power at the federal government. Well, we've taken that triangle and we've turned it upside down, with the feds and the state coming down and dumping on our local communities. And part of the reason that's happened, and I'm not knocking anybody because people are busy, but, government goes to those who show up. Mm-hmm. So over the years, we citizens haven't really been engaged that much in our local governments. And so as a result, and other people who want something from government show up at these meetings, and they advocate for these things. And so we've got a big rock to push uphill, and we need all hands on deck.
No question. I've gone to a lot over the years, a lot of city council meetings and committee meetings and that type of thing. And the thing that has always struck me is how few people are there, except if there's an issue that they're real hot and bothered about. And then you'll have a couple hundred people show up, and they'll scream and yell. And as soon as they stop talking about that issue, they all leave. And then the meeting continues with two people in the audience, me being one of them.
Well, you wonder why pensions are out of control, because the unions show up at these meetings, and they're in the face of the city council, and the taxpayers aren't there.
Yeah, exactly. And they think that they're not there, therefore they don't care, so we can do what we want, and they do. Okay, let's go quickly to Ken in San Jose. And by the way, Ken, just so you know, the projection for San Jose that by 2022 they will have to build 34,929 additional housing units. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, hi, Barbara. Mimi. Yeah. By the way, thank you, Mimi, for your presentation in the Burbank area a couple of months ago. It was very interesting. I went to one of the meetings following that, and it was just as you described. They really don't want public input. They block it in several subtle ways. But anyway, my question is, what about local ballot initiatives? My memory is hazy, but I think there was a statewide attempt to defeat, to roll back AB 32, was there not? But anyway, I guess it failed, but maybe I'm wrong about that. But anyway, what about local initiatives in some of these communities like Danville, Moraga, Saratoga, someplace that might be more amenable to defeating it?
Okay, so first of all, I'm not an attorney. I want to make that really clear. I think you have much more chance of doing something locally than you do statewide. It would take millions and millions of dollars to do something statewide, and, the chances of success are probably not that great.
Yeah.
The danger, and I'm not saying don't do this, but what happened to Pleasanton was they actually passed a no-growth resolution in town, and that's what instituted the suit from Urban Habitat. So we're getting squeezed from all directions. And
as you said, one of the things, and I certainly know that from my experience in talking to elected officials, they do everything they can to avoid a lawsuit because it's expensive. There's no question about it. I mean, I know of one instance where it's been going on for like 20 years for a housing development. They haven't stuck the shovel in the ground yet because it's been going back and forth and lawsuits and this and the other. Nothing's happening. It's a frightening thing, but you're absolutely right. But thank you, Ken. I think each community has to make up its own mind. But the most important thing is getting as many people in town to know what you're talking about and to know what's going on so that they have an understanding of it. And the truth is they don't, and it's very hard to get the message out. I'm Barbara Simpson. We'll be right back on KSFO. Barbara Simpson here on Hot Talk 560 KSFO. Let's go to the phones. My guest is Mimi Steele with BayAreaLiberty.org. Lisa is calling from San Jose. Hi, Lisa. You're on the air with Barbara and Mimi Steele on KSFO.
Hi there.
Hi.
This measure was brought up at the latest election, and it was called Measure T21. And they brought it in through a councilman who was very protective of environmental issues.
Yeah. And what city is this?
This was in Yuba City, Marysville area.
Yuba City, Marysville, okay.
And then this man, even though he was a gentleman who had been in his position for a number of years, and he didn't seem to have much strength, so people weren't worried about it, the ones that knew how adverse this thing could be. But what happened was there was an activist, a woman activist came up from Los Angeles with a check for $20,000 in her pocket to be spent to advertise this as protecting the...
What was the measure supposed to do? We can't go into all of the details. What was the measure supposed to do?
Save the foothills from development and give the power back to the people and not to the politicians.
Okay, and what was the outcome? Did it win or lose?
It lost by only 200 votes.
Okay, and your problem is that outside money was helping promote it or go against it, rather?
That's right. It was an outside concern that this activist brought it to full power, and it was hard to get the message out because the locals didn't have the money to do it.
That's always one of the problems. I don't think it's illegal what they did. I don't know all the ins and outs of the election laws, but I would suspect what they did was not illegal. But that's one of the problems. For one thing, people believe advertising. You know, I mean, it drives me crazy. I work in communications, and I see it all the time, and it just drives me nuts. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate your regrets about that kind of thing. Do you have any quick comments on something like that, Mimi Steele?
Yeah, Barbara, I was just reading Ecofascist, and in the first chapter, Elizabeth talks about the fact that there's something like $9 billion a year that the environmentalists have to advertise their cause.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of money floating around, and those that are for property rights and liberty just don't have the resources, and they also count on picking us off one by one. When, you know, the other comment that was made earlier about why don't we get organized and stuff like that, well, yeah, we'd really like to, but it's easier said than done.
And you know, part of the problem why we don't get organized is we're too busy out there trying to earn a living.
Exactly.
There's
to pay
that
for
too.
all of this stuff that we are earning a living to pay for our own demise. We are funding all of these things.
No question. Let's go to, line 8. Sunny in Pleasanton is on the line. And by the way, Pleasanton has to build 2,058 housing units between now and 2022. So go ahead, Sunny. You're on the air.
Yes, ma'am. They collapsed like an old bag. Mm-hmm. This is not new. I'm an old. You can tell by the scratchy voice, I'm sure.
You sound great, Sonny.
I'm an old geezer, and having been in the industrial machine business, you went to all the cities, all of them, and this was the same crap that was going on starting in the mid '60s.
What do you mean?
Well, we were talking about keeping people in the city core, stacked one on top of the other, starting with the projects and on and on and on and on, so that they could bring people in from the suburbs and do this and do that, and they could ride
the transportation,
BART-like transportation, right, and so forth. And you would never cities like Antioch and Pittsburgh were bedroom communities. Now they're shooting galleries.
Yeah.
Same thing with it hasn't happened in La Miranda, hasn't happened in the Tri-Valley, hasn't
not yet
happened in Contra Costa, but it's coming, and this was the same stuff the government was using back then with some different headings to the context.
No
but it was the same context.
Yeah.
Well, build these big projects, which HUD, of course, has bulldozed since then. Say Cabrini Green is
in
now
Chicago.
Just Green. All the stuff has been just moved out.
I remember that Cabrini Green, reading about that one, and as you said, excuse me,
built by HUD.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Sonny. I appreciate it. I remember the Cabrini Green, and that was a big inner city housing project that was built in Chicago, and it became it was just crime. It was terrible, and it was so bad that the people who were living there were getting attacked by the people who were there. And they finally tore the whole thing down. Housing and urban development, as Sonny said, built it. So in essence, you have the same kind of things happening, right, Mimi?
Exactly, Barbara. And the interesting thing is what Sonny described was called urbanism at the time, and now what the planners want us to do is new urbanism. It's the same thing. There are two comments on that. One is that it's got more teeth now, I think, and we're getting to this critical mass where there's more and more people who are willing to say, yes, we need to do this for social equity or whatever reason. And so you're starting to get the mentality change that's going to make this go. And you also now have the teeth coming down from the state with SB 375. And then, of course, the federal government, you had Stanley Kurtz on talking about his book, Spreading the Wealth, a couple months ago. And they have a vested interest in seeing all this happen because it supports their voting constituency.
Exactly. It all comes down to that. Let's go quickly to Ralph in Pleasanton. You're on the air on KSFO with Barbara Simpson and my guest, Mimi Steele. Hello there, Ralph.
Hi, good evening. I want to give a positive shout-out for Rosa of Santa Rosa, Heather, and Mimi. I joined after they started all of this and got my attention. I've been going to these meetings for about 2 years.
Good for you.
And the Lady D who said this is all about their denial and it just total disrespect for us is absolutely true.
Yeah.
The first time I went to a meeting, I went home in a daze. I couldn't believe this was America. I wanted to talk about this very low income, moderate income.
Okay.
I live in Pleasanton. I think what that means to us is that low income, very low income means they don't have a job.
Mm-hmm.
And that means Section 8.
That's right.
That means a lot of, and then you go to the low income and, well, they're probably struggling mightily. This means more social programs laid on the cities. You know, the reason cities like Oakland have the problem is because they've created a business plan and a fiscal problem that doesn't work. So now they want to regionalize, redistribute all the money, send more folks, because I heard the lady say this right in a meeting.
Yeah.
We need to those people don't have their fair share of the problems we have. We need to redistribute people out and money from the outer suburbs.
So that we have the same problems they do. That's what they want. You know, you mentioned Section 8, and I will admit that a little bit earlier as I was speaking with Mimi, that was going through my mind of what happens when you do this. You bring Section 8 housing into a community, and in 99.9% of the cases, you have an increase in crime, you have an increase in all kinds of negative drug use, all kinds of negative aspects. And, of course, you're not supposed to say that because they're really just nice people, just like the rest of us. Well, you know, if that's the kind of people they bring into a community, that's not where I want to live. I worked all my life to earn enough money to bring up my kids in a relatively safe, nice area, and I'll be damned if I'm going to have some government come in and force it out of me.
So here's the issue. Instead of working on a bad plan and doing what the citizens of their city deserve, they continue a bad plan, transfer the problem out to the suburbs, take the money, and continue on with the same plan they've had.
No question. Thank you. Any thoughts on that, Mimi?
You know, in addition to Section 8, we have heard comments that they're going to use a lot of this housing for halfway houses for people that are coming out of rehab, and also for people that are coming out of prisons. You know, there's a big push to not have as many prisoners.
Oh, to release them. Yes, a lot of early
releases,
yep.
And they're going to end up in a lot of this housing. The other comment I want to make, too, is that when you think about what's going to happen, this definitely changes the demographics of your town.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, Ken was talking earlier about putting a measure on the ballot to do certain things. Well, you start changing the demographics of your town and have a lot of people that are the takers, if you will, you're going to start getting a lot more votes for more taxes.
Yeah. And of course, but we're seeing that already with the way things passed just in this last election.
It's going to get worse, Barbara.
Yeah, no question. Okay, we've got Liz on the line calling from Mill Valley. And by the way, Mill Valley is going to have to build at least 129 of these housing need allocations. That's the number they have. So you have that in your future, Liz.
Right at the busiest intersection.
There
Thanks
you go.
to you, Barbara. I've been to several Mimi meetings, and
Good.
I've been to ABAG.
Good.
But it is so frustrating, and I sound like I'm going back over what you've already covered here. But it is about our frustration that we can't get a mass of people knowing soon enough about what's going on. At one of Mimi's Livermore meetings, I met the man who owns the property north of 580 in Alameda County. Mm-hmm. He is younger than I, but he was hoping to build 2 small houses for his sons on this large property.
Yeah.
He is not able to do that. They have completely shut him down. And then how can he sell that property since it's been put in this category?
Well, that's the problem. They take the use away from it. If you have land, a lot of people bought a lot of land years ago when it was cheap and they were smart,
yes.
And now they want to either subdivide it or sell it.
Right.
Well, when they tell you can't build on it, you can't graze on it, you can't do this on it, it's virtually worthless.
Well, we were all stunned at Kelo. This hit me when he told me that, just like Kelo did. You know,
that was the Kelo decision, the Supreme Court decision that took private property away and gave it to the city, took private property away, gave it to another private corporation, which wound up not doing anything.
They've never done a thing,
and they tore down all the houses.
Yes, they bulldozed her house.
Right.
But Mimi and Barbara, is there any way? I mean, John Stossel seems to be hip to this, but now that he's gone to Fox, I don't know how many people are watching.
They got a good audience there.
Who could we, if we, I always think that through you, Barbara, and through others that we listen to, could we, and maybe Amy has an idea on this, if we sent 300 or 400 emails all in the same week to one person, encouraging them to make this nationally public. When Glenn Beck's book came out, I said, "Oh, good," and my husband's response was, "I don't know if that's going to help or hurt," because they've Saul Alinsky'd him already about what a nutcase he is, right?
Well, they're trying to do that, but they did that before, which is why he's branched off on his own. He's been quite successful. Let's have Mimi get into this, because thank you, Liz, for calling. Mimi, you did get a chance to meet Glenn Beck, and you were on his program, right?
Correct. Before I get to that, I want to make a comment. You know, when she talked about the Kelo decision, that was eminent domain.
Right.
And in the Constitution, somebody has to be compensated, and it's supposed to be private for public use, and so that was the travesty there.
Right.
But what we're talking about with this ballot box planning and what Liz was talking about, our rancher north of 580, we call that administrative takings. And so effectively, the use of the land, or what it can be turned into, has been taken out of the property owner's hands, but he still owns the property, he's still paying taxes, and his hands are tied with what he can do about it. So in my mind, that's worse than eminent domain.
Yeah.
On the issue of Glenn Beck, I'm in touch with his organization. He talked after the show about he really wanted to focus on this. I think he sees local as the key, and he sees the property rights as a major component of getting people involved, because it hits people where they live. Mm-hmm. And so, by all means, send a bunch of emails to him, and I think he's going to be doing future programs. He already is well aware of what's happening in the Bay Area. If people go to my YouTube channel, which is YouTube.com/SFBayCAPR. There's a bunch of video snippets from that show. Mm-hmm. They can look at it, and I think he's going to come back and be doing more, and he's especially impressed that San Francisco is resisting, because he said, who would have thunk, right?
Absolutely. Well, who would have thunk it? We got to take a break. We'll be right back on KSFO. I'm Barbara Simpson.
You're listening to Barbara Simpson on Hot Talk 560 KSFO.
Barbara Simpson here on Hot Talk 560 KSFO. Mimi, I want to thank you so much for staying as long as you did. We didn't plan on this, but we got really good reaction to the kinds of things we've been talking about. Now, if people want to get involved, what would you ask them to do?
A couple things. I would ask them to go to bayarealiberty.org and get on my email list. We have people in all 9 counties of the Bay Area, and I send out information about meetings and things that are happening, or something like Drake's Bay that applies to everybody. So that would be a first step. On that website, I have a calendar of events, and if people have events that they know about that are property rights events in their area, just send it to me, and I will try to get it on the calendar, and you can look and see. We've got a couple meetings coming up this coming week in Mountain View, and I think the Danville meeting is December 11th. The second initiation on that. I have a thing called Property Rights Watchdog. If you see something, say something, let me know. Hopefully, I have a group in Alameda County. We meet the fourth Thursday of every month. If you're in Alameda County, we'd love to have you join us. And we're building networks, and we're building people. This is a grassroots organization, and like I said, it's sort of like herding cats. But I think we're starting to get to a level where enough people are waking up, and they're waking up more people.
That really is what has to happen. People have to start becoming aware of what is going on, because the media are not covering it that way at all. And when you go to the meetings, as we had a caller earlier suggested, that in fact the average citizen who disagrees or raises even thoughtful questions is sort of ridiculed even by the elected officials, which is really insulting, since the people elected them, presumably.
Yeah, the answer to that is vote them out. And since we haven't paid attention to them, they've gotten really cocky.
Yeah.
But we have stories of towns that have actually changed their elected officials. And, it takes a little bit longer, but you have to know who these people are, where they're coming from, put the pressure on, and if they don't perform, get rid of them.
Get rid of them. Yeah. Just, and what was Jim Eason's favorite was the drip on them. Don't return incumbent politicians.
Oh, I love that.
He used to say that for years, and I've always remembered it, because I think he's right. As he would say, drip on them.
Barbara, could I make one more comment?
Yes, go ahead.
I think this is a success. It's not completely done yet, but Alameda County had a measure on the ballot for transportation funds, and I don't want to go into the gory details, but some people on my team found out about that. We were able to write a no, don't vote for this, because it was going to be an extra tax and wasted money. We got our no position printed on the ballot, and the measure was defeated. And they didn't expect it in Alameda County, and now they're asking for a recount. So,
oh wow,
it's a small thing,
yeah.
But a couple people can make a really, really big difference. So, please get involved. Don't get discouraged. We're here for you. Get on our email list, and we'll go from there.
Very good. Thank you so much, Mimi, for being with us. I appreciate it, and we definitely will talk with Mimi again. But she's absolutely right about getting involved, about you have to learn about things. You got to spread the word. You got to talk to your neighbors. I always am just disgusted when I see measures on the ballot, as happened in this last election in a variety of jurisdictions, where there are measures for sales taxes or parcel taxes or school taxes or God knows what else they're raising taxes on. And there's no position. As though, well, of course everybody wants this. Well, no. But, a lot of people don't know how to say no. They don't know how to get the no position on a ballot. I have not ever done it myself. I'll be honest with you. If I was going to do it tomorrow, I would have to find out specifically of how you do it. It's not that hard. You can do it. But the problem is they sort of finesse this and push it through, and then all of a sudden the deadline is over and there's nobody there. It's just like when you have seats open on a board or on a city council or something like that. There's nobody running against anybody, because the deadline for declaring sort of slipped by and nobody really knew, and it really is kind of nice if nobody's running against you. And generally speaking, the incumbent wins. Don't return incumbent politicians. Vote them out. Get rid of them. Dump them. Give somebody else a chance. Can they do much worse? Sometimes. They might do better. You never know. Let's go to Mary in San Diego. Hi, Mary in San Diego.
Hi, Barbara. I know it's a long ways away. I tuned into your show because of Mimi. Mimi and I are trying to coordinate Northern California with Southern California.
Are you going through the same things down there?
Yes.
Okay,
absolutely.
I need people to know that, because I think they think it's just us when I talk about it here. It really is statewide, isn't it?
Oh, yes. Well, it's global. It's
Yeah.
absolutely global, but it's statewide, and actually San Diego, our version of ABAG is called Sandbag. And they've
Sandbag or Sandag?
Sandag, sand.
I thought you said sandbag. I like that better.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Well, they already passed their 2050 plan before we even knew anything was going on.
Yeah.
But San Diego has been involved in sort of their version of sustainable development since the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I'm calling is really to encourage people to get involved. And I know, we go around talking and people say, well, what do we do? I have no expertise. Who am I? And, what I like to say to them is, first of all, you are everyone. You and you and you and you become everyone. Mm-hmm. So individual effort is important in this case. But I also tell them that, hey, I graduated as a theater arts dance person who speaks Spanish. And I have absolutely no expertise in land use or conservation easements or transportation or housing or anything like that. But I was just so, upset with what was going on. My sort of civic duty came up, and so I just decided to start becoming an expert by reading and educating myself, and was frustrated speaking to elected officials who wouldn't listen to me, putting a tinfoil hat on my head. So I thought, well, I need to go at these people with facts. And so I actually got to know Wendell Cox, who is an expert in demographics and transportation. He's written many, many articles for the Wall Street Journal and so forth. He comes, he goes on MSNBC, and so we started coordinating this idea that if we could present facts to the elected officials using the resources, for example, that the American Planning Association uses, or Smart Growth Network, any of these advocates for smart growth, sustainable development use, and basically rebuke their claims using their own resources.
Did it work? We're real tight on time. Did it work?
Yeah. Well, it's working. We're field testing it, and people are taking it into meetings with City Council armed with facts.
Good.
It's fantastic.
Good. Well, listen, I appreciate, A, the fact that you were listening, B, that you decided to call, and I think it's really important for my listeners, particularly, I know I have listeners all over, but particularly the Bay Area, to realize that you're not alone, that this is being done all across the country and, in fact, the world. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's true. And you need to know that it has to be fought like a lot of little battles here and there and everywhere, and then eventually get united and fight it the way that it needs to be fought. Get rid of the people in office. That's the first step. It really is. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate your listening. Thanks for calling. And, and the sad part is, look at the results of the election. The state is in the palm of liberals. And no doubt, in many cases, so is your local government. So it makes it even harder. Why do people do that? Because it's easier, because the name was familiar, because you're an idealist and you think that people like me are these crazy redneck conservatives who are trying to destroy the earth? No, not at all. I'm not an environmentalist. I'm a conservationist. I've always said that. I don't want dirty air and dirty water. I lived in Los Angeles when the air was orange. I didn't like it. I'm glad the air is not orange anymore. I'm glad that certain rivers in Ohio don't get on fire anymore. But the fact remains is we've got lots of battles, lots of brush fires to fight. And it all comes down to the local level. Start in your own community. Go to the meetings. Be the pain in the neck who comes to every meeting and stands up and makes comments. I do it. They have to listen to me. They don't have to do anything I say, but they have to listen because they're sitting there looking at me. The newspaper never reports it because I'm, stirring things up, and they don't like to report anybody who's stirring things up. Everything has to be nice. Everything has to be nice to each other. You can't say anything that might get anybody upset. We have to be cordial and polite. I'm not talking about disrupting meetings. I'm talking about standing up and saying what you feel. You have a right to do it. Tim in Carlsbad, you got about 20 seconds. Go ahead.
Boy, notwithstanding recent changes, additions, and callbacks to KSFO, you're still the best part of that station.
Oh, thank you.
A little north of San Diego here and a little south of San Onofre. Thank you for that heads up. But I would just say in closing to your discussion that this is the part of this that people frown about when they regard people like us is that they say we're alarmists. They say that we're throwbacks to the 50s when we say that there is definitely an agenda, and it's definitely a leftist agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And these are all tools that they're using to throw us back into that leftist nightmare that they tried to foster it in the late 60s.
Yep, there's no question.
I unabashedly say this to my friends. They think I'm crazy, but I know I'm right.
Well, you are right. And, I was working for Captain Jacques Cousteau at the time that he went down to the Rio conference where the Agenda 21 was adopted. So I have some insight into what was going on then and what has transpired since. It's all there. It's all written out. This is nothing that is not available for people to see. It is not a conspiracy. It's on paper. Check it out. We will talk more about it. Thank you very much for calling. I appreciate it. We're about out of time. I think we're out of time this hour. We're just about out of time this hour. But anyway, I'm here on weekends, you know that, and just check my column on WND.com. They posted it this afternoon. And you take care of yourselves. Be aware. Watch what they're doing to you. Watch your back and be careful what you pray for. You might get it.